So similar in the liquid markets, but different in the sense that there are direct lenders there now to provide that capital.
Well, certainly a highlight of our day. Ken, be well. Ken Kinsell, President and CEO at Churchill Asset Management, joining us from the Greenwich Economic Forum in Greenwich. Many people argue that these private credit guys is why the regional banking crisis maybe wasn't so bad earlier this year. Carol Masters, Simone Foxman, this is Bloomberg Radio.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 3:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We begin with headlines from the Bloomberg Professional Service, and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says she is, quote, very optimistic about the U.S. economic outlook. She says the U.S. is on a path of fiscal sustainability. Her remarks came at a Fortune CEO initiative. Stocks lower across the board. Stocks are slumping. Treasury yields hitting new multi-year highs after this morning's jobs data bolstered the case for the Fed to keep interest rates elevated. S&P 500 index down 64, a drop of 1.5%. The Dow down 468 points right now, down 1.4%. We are very close to session lows. NASDAQ down 271, a decline of 2%. 10-year yield 4.79% with a 2-year at 5.13%. Gold down $3 the ounce to $18.25, a drop of 0.2%. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.8%, $89.55 for a barrel of WTI. The yen did depreciate past the psychological support level of 150 against the dollar, putting traders on watch for possible intervention by Japan to prop up the currency. Well, as for rising yields and where to invest in the equity market, Claudia Panseri is head of equity strategies at UBS Switzerland.
We are positioned for having this yield higher. We have been calling for value stocks for a while. Value has a big movement back and outperforming over the last 2 months. I think there is more to go.
And you can hear more of that conversation on the Bloomberg Markets podcast. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts. McCormick shares are slumping the most since the start of the COVID pandemic after the maker of spices and seasonings reported sales that trailed expectations. McCormick right now down by about 8%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Master along with Simone Foxman here at Bloomberg headquarters. A little bit of a crazy day in D.C., and I was just kind of saying to keep track of kind of the different motions that can be done. And at the top of the hour, we were hearing reaction on the House floor as Republican Kevin McCarthy, U.S. House Speaker, lost a pivotal vote today, demonstrating really hardline conservatives do have the power to soon end his tumultuous 10 months as House Speaker. His survival in politics and as House Speaker now hinging on whether he can build a last-minute alliance by offering hefty concessions to the Democrats who have refused to help him or to possibly strike a deal with his conservative critics. So there's a lot going on, and we're waiting for more motions. McCarthy does have 2 days for a vote to maybe give him some more room to negotiate, but to maybe end this move to oust him. So a lot of back and forth here and just trying to keep track of it all for all of you.
And it sounds like we could get some more news around approximately 3:50 p.m. Eastern time to 4:10 p.m. when the House proceeds to a manual roll call vote on the resolution. And that would be the resolution declaring the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives to be vacant. So that, I believe, would remove him from that position. And then can he come back?
Right. It's a motion to vacate. All right. So let's, that we're keeping track of. And we're also keeping track of some activity in Lower Manhattan. This has to do with jury selection beginning in the case against Sam Bankman-Fried. And outside Manhattan Federal Courthouse in downtown New York is Bloomberg Sound On and Bloomberg Crypto co-host Kaylee Lines. We also welcome with us Bloomberg News editor Tom Maloney, who's here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio, and a great read and write on the Bloomberg terminal about SBF and FTX. Kaylee, I want to start with you. Set the mood, set the scene. What has gone on so far in downtown New York?
Well, so far, it's just been jury selection. There's been a number of jurors who have been ruled out of the juror pool because they've been vetted and either had conflicts. One said that he already had a preconceived negative feeling about crypto. So that's really the process that is underway today, trying to put this jury together. That process could conclude until early tomorrow. And then we will enter the arguments phase of the trial, where prosecutors will make their case on these allegations that Sam Bankman-Fried perpetrated one of the greatest financial frauds in U.S. history, that he misused customer funds, commingled them between FTX, the exchange he ran in Alameda, his hedge fund that he founded that he said was operating separately from FTX. And prosecutors will allege that essentially this scheme allowed him to use customer funds to make risky investments, invest in real estate. Ultimately, the proceeds of this fraud were able to power his political donations. That's all what the prosecution will say. But of course, the defense will say that this was not intentional. He did not intentionally commit fraud. This is something Bankman-Fried himself has said repeatedly leading up to this trial. And we should note he has pleaded not guilty to all 7 of the charges he's facing.
Yeah, Kaylee, can you talk about the expected duration of this trial and then what the penalties could be for SBF if he is found guilty?
Well, it's going to be a long process. This trial could take up to 6 weeks. So this really is just the very beginning. There's going to be several weeks of both the prosecution and the defense making their cases. But if at the end he is found guilty of one or all of the charges he's facing, he could potentially, if given the maximum sentence, spend the rest of his life in prison. 5 of the counts that he is facing come with a maximum sentence of 20 years. So if found guilty on all charges and you add it all together, he very well could be looking at a sentence of 100 years plus.
Tom, it may be a long duration, and that's all interesting, but it's like the details that will ultimately come out, because there's some really interesting witnesses in all of this who have already pled guilty.
Yeah, absolutely. You have his kind of on again, off again girlfriend, Caroline Ellison. I think she has pled guilty. You have his, I think he was co-CEO, Ryan Salami.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be some very interesting witnesses for sure. Gary Wang, his childhood best friend, right? And one of the sort of technical people at FTX. I think his testimony is going to be critical in terms of how much Bankman-Fried knew about what was actually going on in the code and all of the kind of backdoor stuff that was going on at FTX.
Before we go back to Kaylee, I mean, as you guys laid out on the terminal, a great read-through of like kind of from start to finish. We're not actually finished, but from the rise to the fall of SBF, what strikes you most as we go through this process?
You know, look, I think looking back, what's most surprising, and we were chatting about this before, is how many red flags people were kind of ignoring or even sort of celebrating in this guy. You know, back in 2022 when his net worth peaked, you know, people were investing in him and looking at him as a real kind of savant. You know, he was talking to investors while playing video games, doing interviews while playing video games, just, you know, kind of getting in and talking to as many journalists as he could, and really things that, you know, in hindsight look like pretty unusual behavior, but at the time were sort of seen as, you know, this guy's different. This guy's obviously a genius because he is kind of strange.
We've seen it before, right? We've seen money, investor money, especially on the West Coast, roll into people who are just a little bit different because it sounds like maybe they figured something out.
Yeah, Kaylee, I mean, I guess he sort of had this almost, at least at some points, cocky persona before this really came about. I mean, do we know anything about what SBF's state of mind or is going into this trial, what the people around him are saying?
Like?
Yeah.
Well, we do know based on his appearance at the courthouse today, granted cameras can't be in the room, so we don't actually have photos or videos that we can show, we just have sketches. He cut the hair. Remember, he's been really well known for this wild mop of curly hair that he has. That is now short. He is wearing a suit that by all appearances looks too big for him. It looks like he may have lost a certain substantial amount of weight while he has been in jail in Brooklyn, because of course he, while was on a house arrest at his parents' house in California, was found by a judge to be trying to tamper with witnesses, so he got put into this detention facility, has been there for 2 months despite repeated attempts by his defense team to try to get him out of it. And there's been a lot of complaints about the food that he isn't able to eat, that he's basically been subsisting of bread and water and some peanut butter. And so in theory, maybe that is all weighing on his state of mind, but the reporting we have from inside the courthouse at this time is, to this point, he's sitting there pretty calmly, taking notes on a computer that isn't connected to the internet, and so far seems, you know, relatively sanguine about the whole thing, but of course we'll have to see how things change as the trial plays out.
Tom, I do feel like when, you know, in terms of what might come out in the courtroom is just what SBF knew, what were his responsibilities ultimately. And I also thought it was interesting in the story that you guys have out on the terminal about SBF maybe arguing that lawyers at FTX were involved in key business decisions and he acted in good faith. So it's just interesting maybe the different strategies he may ultimately take to fight this one.
Yeah, and I think one of the really interesting things that came out in the past couple of weeks was that great story we had at Bloomberg about his relationship with his parents. You know, his dad was one of those lawyers who was often in the room in those negotiations. So how does that kind of come out in the trial, I think will be really interesting.
Kaylee, do we know if he'll testify in his own defense?
Well, this is going to be one of the major questions, is whether Sam Bankman-Fried is going to testify himself. He has been kind of an unusual white-collar crime defendant in that he's been very vocal. He's spoken about this in media. He has kind of tried to make his own case in the public rather than having his defense attorneys speak for him. So it'll be interesting to see if he does take the stand. He was asked in court earlier if he understood that he cannot be compelled to testify. He said yes, but we're kind of going to have to wait and see on that one. It would certainly be unusual unusual if he, as a white-collar crime defendant, did decide to testify on his own behalf, but there's a lot that's unusual about this case.
No, nothing unusual, Kaylee. Nothing at all. It's been pretty remarkable. All right, Kaylee Lyons, so appreciate your insight and what you're seeing. And Tom, thank you so much as well. Bloomberg News editor Tom Maloney, I highly recommend you check out the reporting on SBF on the terminal, and we'll be checking in with Kaylee throughout the day. Of course, co-host of Bloomberg Crypto and Bloomberg Sound On as well. Do want to remind you of our top story at this hour, coming out of not Lower Manhattan, although we're watching that, but also coming out of the nation's capital. Republican Kevin McCarthy losing a pivotal test vote today, demonstrating hardline conservatives do have the power to soon end his tumultuous 10 months as House Speaker. Will we ultimately get a new U.S. House Speaker? We will potentially find out maybe in the next coming days, so something we're going to continue to certainly track for you here at Bloomberg. Let's stay in D.C. Let's get a check on all world and national news. For that, it's over to Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Carol. It is the news of the day. Debate is underway in the House right now on whether to oust Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. Virginia Congressman Bob Good will be voting to remove him.
We need a Speaker who will fight for something, anything, besides just staying or becoming Speaker.
Another Republican, Congressman Tom Cole, is backing McCarthy.
The overwhelming majority of my party supports the Speaker that we elected. We're proud of the leadership he's shown. We're proud of the manner in which he's been willing to work with everybody in our conference and, I believe, in this chamber.
McCarthy's political survival now hinges on whether he can build a last-minute alliance by offering hefty concessions to Democrats who have said they will refuse to help him, or to strike a deal with his conservative critics. A vote is expected this afternoon. Well, as a result of the financial crisis 15 years ago, Congress created the Consumer Financial Protection Board and financed it from the Federal Reserve, which gets its money from member banks. The Supreme Court has been asked to rule that plan unconstitutional. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman has more on today's arguments.
The case was brought by Payday Lenders, their lawyer, Noel Francisco.
Has Congress made a determination as to what the amount should be, or has it delegated that fundamental determination to the executive branch?
This kind of funding goes all the way back to the Customs Service in 1890, government lawyer Elizabeth Prelogar argued.
Our argument here relies heavily on history.
Justice Kenji Brown Jackson agreed.
It seems to give the legislature the prerogative of the purse, and here we have a statute in which the legislature has exercised that.
If the conservative justices rule against the agency, the court could overturn every penalty it ever levied against financial institutions. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 3:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We begin with a developing story headline right now on the Bloomberg Professional Service. The Molson Coors Beverage Company has authorized a $2 billion share buyback program. Molson Coors, which has the ticker TAP, it is down now by 1.6%. And now let's head right over to the First Word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. U.S. stocks under pressure from the start as yields continue their move higher. Dow's currently down 480 points. S&P's dropped 67, and NASDAQ is lower by 2.2%. The U.S. 10-year yield is now at 4.81%. Gold is down 4. Oil trading in the green, and Bitcoin is down by 1.6%. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, only utilities were in the green, and leaders to the upside in the Dow, Walgreens and Boeing, while American Express, Microsoft, and Home Depot each fell 3% and led to the downside. In deal news, Eli Lilly agreed to pay $1.4 billion for cancer drug maker Point Biopharma. And in other news, the Wall Street Journal reported that Amazon allegedly used an algorithm to raise prices. Wrapping things up, McCormick dropped to its lowest since 2020 after sales and profit missed estimates. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill Maloney. To hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type SQUAK, S-Q-U-A, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
It's
the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, just about 17 and a half minutes to be exact until the closing bell rings on this Tuesday, October 3rd. This is one of those days, Simone, Carol Masser, along with Simone Foxman. Simone in for my co-host, Tim Stanovic. But Simone, it's one of those days where I don't have enough screens on the Bloomberg because there's just SBF, there's DC, there's the market, there's a lot going on.
I've got two big screens, and they are crazy right now. Watching for McCarthy headlines, watching for Sam Bankman-Fried, and also watching the Fed. I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, right. All the Fed speak and chatter. So let's get to it. Let's see what our next guest has to say. He's got to keep a watch, certainly, on the trade and the markets. Joining us once again is Aaron Kennan. He is co-founder and chief executive officer of Clear Harbor Asset Management. Clear Harbor Asset Management. They've got over $1 billion in assets under management, and he is joining us once again on Zoom from Stamford, Connecticut. I'm rushing to get to you because I feel like there's a lot to talk about. Aaron, good to have you back. Hope you're well. I got to start with the D.C. news and what's going on in terms of the U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Got to ask, how does it factor in to how you think about the investment climate or what's going on more broadly? Does it affect decision-making at all?
Well, Carol, thanks for having me back.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't instill confidence in markets at a time when markets seem to be lacking sort of clear footing on the way forward. You know, we've been a country that has really advanced due to, finding compromise and common ground, from Benjamin Franklin to the present. That's how we have moved the ball down the field for the American people. And to see what's happening in Congress, not just today, but generally, sort of general strife and polarization on key issues, whether it's the deficit and how that may impact treasuries, or the border and how that impacts even the health of our children. So it's sort of a sad moment, in my opinion.
Do you see that having any impact on the market?
Well, certainly I think that there have been incremental shifts occurring. This is just one of them in the sort of slow fracturing of sort of the foundation of faith that America is a force that can be relied upon. And I'm a big patriot, but I think if you look at sort of our country over the last 50 years, sort of pre-fall of the Berlin Wall, we were very much a bipolar world. And post Berlin Wall falling, we were really the sole superpower. And today, we have multiple forces at work, whether it's the war in Ukraine and Russia, but also the strife between China and the U.S., and how key economies in the world, like India, are sort of functioning in a way that maybe they hadn't thought of before. It changes the way trade occurs. It changes the way the currency in which trade is taking place. China can sell product in rupees to India. India can buy oil from Russia in rupees today, just as an example. And that on the margin can have a negative impact on the need for these economies, these countries, to hold those reserves in U.S. dollars, which is just one incremental point of pressure perhaps occurring here in the U.S. Treasury market. So that's a very long-winded way, Simone, of me saying yes.
No, but it's relevant and it makes sense within this environment, Aaron. So having said that, you can, suggest to your investors to invest anywhere in the world. So is it time to increasingly look outside the United States in your view?
Well, I think that, the diversification is one of the last free lunches, as they say in investing. And certainly there are opportunities both here in the United States and abroad. And the regulatory environment here historically has been very strong. Our laws are very strong for for owners of capital. And so that has been one principal reason why there's been a natural tendency to want to overweight the United States on a go-forward basis. Not to mention that we tend to consume in dollars, and these companies are trade in dollars. And so, with that said, we see opportunities in Europe. We see opportunities in South America and in Asia, particularly in Japan right now. We think that there's an interesting shift in sentiment and regulatory environment in Japan, where investors are essentially forcing companies to think about return on invested capital, return on equity, buybacks, mergers and acquisitions. If you want to stay listed on the topics, they're sort of nudging companies to think of these new variables. So there are opportunities everywhere, and it's not just equities right now. In fact, with the rise of interest rates, particularly treasuries are really competing in a way with equities they haven't in such a long time, perhaps in the last 15, 20 years, where real rates on the 10-year treasury, just as an example, with 10-year treasuries at 4.8% today, and the 10-year break-even inflation at 2.35%, which is quite low, we haven't seen the difference between those two numbers, 2.45%. We haven't seen that in about 20 years or so. And so, yes, it feels like we're catching a falling knife when we're buying treasuries today in this market where the long bond's down 2%, but certainly look a lot more attractive today than they have in a long time.
So where do you put your incremental dollar right now?
Well, that's one area. It's thinking about our targets. We think that the high-grade mortgage-backed securities, U.S. agency mortgage-backed securities, and U.S. Treasuries are an interesting place to think about allocating, whether it's incremental fixed income dollars or dollars from the sideline, or possibly, depending on the mandate, of course, dollars even from the equity asset class. We still believe in equities for the long run here at Clear Harbor. It's central to how we think about investing for many of our families, many of our non-for-profit organizations that we manage capital for. But we do think, also therefore moving out the duration curve. Yes, Treasury bills are really attractive at 5.4, 5.5%, but now you can buy a 10-year at 4.80, a 20-year at about, what was it today? I'm looking at the Bloomberg screen at 5.13. We haven't seen this sort of environment for a long time, and we think it's worthy of nudging further out the curve. The Bloomberg Aggregate Bond Index, the primary benchmark, has an average maturity of about 8.5 years. You don't have to go at 8.5 years, but if you're at 2 now, I recommend moving out to 3 or 4. If you're at 3, move out to 4 or 5. So that's sort of how we're thinking about it. Incremental moves, not major tactical shifts.
Yeah, no, we talk about that, right? If you think about equity versus the fixed income can give you certainly returns and kind of lock it in with less risk, especially when there's a lot of questions going forward. Hey, Aaron, thank you. Aaron Kennan, co-founder, CEO at Clear Harbor Asset Management, on Zoom from Stamford, Connecticut. Folks, got about 11 minutes left in today's trading session. This is Bloomberg Radio.
your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We are continuing to monitor developments on Capitol Hill for the latest on House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's future. Molson Coors Beverage has authorized a $2 billion share buyback program. Sources tell Bloomberg United Airlines is poised to announce an agreement to buy a double-digit number of Airbus A321 narrow-body jets, and an order could be announced as soon as today. Macy's is opening 30 new small-format stores by the fall of 2025 as it works to expand its presence outside of traditional malls. But if Macy's is going small, what does it mean for those larger malls? Olivia Rockman wrote the story for Bloomberg News.
A lot of malls across the U.S. have already been on the decline as large big box stores like JCPenney, for example, have gone bankrupt. And so when you have a company like Macy's that does still have department stores in traditional malls, and it's saying that it's kind of not going to bet on that strategy as strongly anymore, it adds to the demise of traditional mall retail.
And on a down day for the rest of the market, Macy's shares down now by 1% among some of the other department store names. Kohl's Corp higher by 0.4%. Actually, Kohl's is down 4%. It is Target that is up now by 0.3%. And Macy's, by the way, already operates small store locations in markets such as Dallas, Atlanta, St. Louis, and Chicago. And those are some of our top company stories at this hour. I'm Charlie Pellet, and this is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, just under 5 minutes left in today's trading session. And as we speak, we are, focused on Wall Street, but we're also focused on D.C. and the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol, as we are continuing to see debate on the House floor, this following a failure of Republican Kevin McCarthy, U.S. House Speaker currently, who lost a pivotal vote earlier today. And basically, this is on whether or not he can keep his job. They are debating on the House floor whether or not to go through with a vote to remove him as House Speaker. This is unprecedented. This has never happened before.
Yeah, and it definitely looks like the promised compromise that the system would endorse is just not here right at the moment. I mean, yes, this is politics. Yes, things are always uncertain and things always get left to the last minute. But Democrats behind Hakeem Jeffries have come out and said they don't want to vote to keep Kevin McCarthy in the Speaker's chair. Kevin McCarthy apparently watching pretty quietly as Republicans debate his fate, but he did laugh at a line from Representative Mike Garcia of California, who said the chamber was focused today on a few Republicans who are running with scissors and making the day about drama, Carol.
Yeah, a lot of drama, no doubt about it. And we'll see whether or not the current House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, can build some kind of last-minute alliance, so offering perhaps some big concessions to Democrats, what he had to do initially to Republicans to get the speakership, if you will, initially when he took on the job or was trying to get the job, which as we know, multiple votes that had to go through before he got it. Anyway, we are continuing to track that debate, and we'll continue to bring the latest on it when it comes to the future of the U.S. House Speaker. And as Aaron Kennan said to us over at Clear Harbor, other nations look to us for stability and compromise. That is what is the fabric of really the United States and politics, and yet it doesn't look like that's what's happening currently.
Yeah, let me take the other side of that, though. I mean, this whole system is built on debate. It's built on people not agreeing with each other, and it's built on people coming to these sort of last-minute compromises. Maybe we could see that here. It's unclear who would be Speaker if not Kevin McCarthy, too.
Either way, unprecedented time, certainly if we see an ousting of the U.S. House Speaker. All right, we're going to shift gears, keeping our eyes on politics, but we're going to head over to our TV colleagues and talk about the market close on this Tuesday in a week where we've got a jobs report on Friday. So right now, Beyond the Bell. It starts right now.
Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic alongside Scarlett Fu We're counting you down to the closing bell, and here to help take us beyond the bell. It's a global simulcast with our friends Carol Masser and Simone Foxman filling in today for Tim Stenovic. Welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms. Carol Masser, stocks pretty much where they are. Last time we spoke about an hour ago here, not far off session lows.
Yeah, not seeing any buying, right, in the last few minutes or last hour of trading. No, not at all. What's interesting is we just talked with Aaron Kennan over Clear Harbor, and, you know, he said the kind of instability we are seeing in Washington, he does think about it, and he says it doesn't really instill much confidence, if you will, when it comes to investors. He said we're looked at as a country that there is compromise, that we are able to find common ground. That's the history of this country. And so he does think about it a little bit when it comes to certainly how it can impact investments and maybe how he trades for his investors.
And you have to wonder if investors are just focused on the scenes playing out, the debate happening on the House floor in Washington as we get, you know, this debate around the motion to potentially vacate the speaker. Everyone is kind of holding their breaths a little bit right now.
Yeah, we averted a shutdown this time around, but no one knows what's going to happen in mid-November when the spending plan then expires once again, the stopgap measure, and we can do this all over again.
Yeah, and I think leadership is important. We were speaking with Christopher Ailman over at CalSTRS. You know, he makes the point that, you know, Wall Street, of course, tends to shrug off a lot of the nonsense that goes on in Washington, but we're talking about a speakership here that was already somewhat tenuous from the time he took over in January, and it's not quite clear who's going to take over for him and whether they're going to be somehow more cooperative, or what's the phrase you use, Carol? Something like about compromising.
Common ground,
Common
right?
ground, yeah. And I'm not sure. I mean, I feel like the deal McCarthy made was indicative of the common ground we need to see more of. Yet, of course, the people forcing him out are forcing him out because he went out and found that common ground.
Exactly. Right.
Dow Jones Industrial Average down 1.3% on the day, more than 430 points lower, going to close right around that 33,000 level. The S&P 500 lower by 60 points or 1.4%, closing right around 4,229. The NASDAQ Composite lower by 250 points, down 1.9%, closing at 13,059. And the Russell 2000 also down about 1.7% here on the day, closing out at 17,027 or 1,727.
I'm just going to say this is the kind of day where I don't have enough. I said this to Simone earlier. I don't have enough screens on my Bloomberg to kind of keep track of it all. Having said that, Romaine, great read in terms of the final numbers for those major equity averages. S&P 500. What
Sorry, I just want to interrupt you
please.
just to go back to the speakership here. We are now learning that the actual vote to remove the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, is now beginning to take place. It's going to obviously be several minutes before we actually find out exactly what that vote is, but it's important for our viewers to know this is what's now taking place in your House of Representatives, a motion to remove the Speaker of the House, something that hasn't been done, not a vote that has not been done since 1910.
Right. We say unprecedented times, and you do wonder, like, what does this mean? What happens next? And that we're not seeing this common ground being found, this support, so that lawmakers can go about the business, the responsibility of their job to actually govern, find policies that are beneficial to everyone. So this is a rough time, I would say, again, in our history. Having said that,
and I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but I mean, this matters. And I know there are a lot of people in the markets will shrug it off here. But what you're watching right now is something that we have not seen in more than a century. And we should point out here, too, that just the procedure taking place right now, what they're doing, they're actually taking one by one a roll call vote of everyone. So normally everyone just kind of walks up, hits a button, and then they kind of move back on here. But they want this on the record, every single person here to know how they voted, one by one here. So this is going to be a relatively long process that could go on for quite some time before we know the results.
They want their constituents to see them voting no or yes in support of the speaker, the current speaker, Kevin McCarthy. And of course, this is happening right as we close the market on a very down day. You look at the number of decliners compared to advancers, more than 4 stocks lower for everyone that is down for a second straight day, Simone.
Yeah, I mean, there was easy to find some decliners today. Looking at Getty Images, that was getting cut to neutral at Redburn Atlantic. We saw a slowdown in sales there that apparently seems to be connected to slower advertising sales at firms like Google, Meta, Amazon, Snap. Their price target now $6 a share. We're looking at $5.61 right now, but that was after it was down about 12% today. Dish Network also taking the heat, shares down 7%. 7.9% we're looking at. Falling all day, two potential catalysts. Dish Network was actually the first company to be fined for space debris. It left a satellite in the wrong place in space. That's a $150,000 ticket.
How do you leave a satellite in the wrong place?
It's in the wrong space in orbit. It was a retired satellite, and they left it there.
It didn't have one of those Apple white discs on it where you can find everything.
It did not have an AirTag, or at least a working one, no. But also the company amending its merger pact with EcoStar. That's a $4 billion deal announced in August. EcoStar shares.
You have McCormick on this screen. That's a spice company?
It is indeed.
Why are they down? Have we stopped buying spices?
Lowest close since March 2020, actually. Net sales, coming in behind the average analyst estimate, but in particular, folks in China have stopped buying or aren't buying as many as the analysts expected as buying spices. So China's economic recovery apparently has been slower than anticipated. That according to execs at the company, and we're looking at shares down 8.5%.
All right, so quickly to some of the gainers in today's session. This is a big one. I feel like this is the year where a lot of news has come out when it comes to the biopharma industry, whether it's deals or whether it's actually announcements about drug development. So let's get to Point Biopharma surging about 85% in today's session. Eli Lilly agreeing to buy the biotech company, $12.50 in cash. The stock just finishing below that level in a bid to expand its oncology capabilities in radio ligand therapies. And I want to mention Lantheus Holdings because that holds the worldwide license to Point Lead's drug assets. So it also jumped about 10% in today's trade. Intel saw it top of the NASDAQ 100. We saw a note to clients from KeyBank Capital that was out yesterday, which noted that NVIDIA and Intel are bright spots in a soft semiconductor chips market. So Intel, slight gain there, up 0.2%. And Warby Parker up about 3.4% in today's trade, upgraded to outperform from inline at Evercore ISI. They also announced a $20 price target for the company, and the stock finishing at 13 and change, just under 14. About 9% of the float is shorted, though, guys, on that one.
Yeah, let's go to the yield space here. And I actually want to start off with that 30-year yield. Right now, sitting at a higher by about 14 basis points than where it was just yesterday. 492 and change. At one point on the day, it flirted with 5%. And we should just point out, on an intraday basis, it was up about 17 basis points here. That was the biggest move that we've seen, higher or lower, going back to at least, it appears, since March or April of this year. And we saw similar moves on the longer end of the curve as well, with the 20-year up about 13 basis points, your 10-year up about 12. And meanwhile, the 2-year yield only up a measly 4.4 basis points here on the day. And it really begs the question here about that negative correlation that we're seeing between the yields, higher yields, and of course, lower equity prices here, and how much this is going to persist going forward.
Yeah, and you know what always gets my attention? The fact that the 20-year yield is such an outlier. It's yielding more than 5.10% compared to the 10-year and the 30-year. Of course, I asked Katie Greifeld about this, and of course she had written a story about this not so long ago, but it has a lot to do with the lesser liquidity in that tenor.
Yeah, right, because it's not kind of, you look at those numbers and you're like, what's wrong with this read? Aaron Kennan, when we talked with him over at Clear Harbor, pointed that out, like it was an interesting kind of standout among the Treasury trade today.
I just want to mention, too, guys, just crossing the wire right now, some news on Intel, a redhead crossing the Bloomberg terminal, saying that the company is going to separate its programmable solutions group operations. Basically, it's going to operate it as a separate business here under the leadership of Sandra Rivera here, and that will begin on January 1st. So basically, spinning off more or less its programmable solutions group beginning January 1st. Here, I don't know a lot about this particular division or exactly what it does, but
Stock's up 2.7% in the aftermarket.
Yeah, so investors seem to like it, I guess.
But this idea of spinning off companies hasn't worked out very well for a lot of the companies that have been spun off, right?
Well, it depends on what the name. I mean, is it going to be like Intellanova or something like that, or
Intel 2.0?
Yeah,
and you actually
I'm still trying to figure out what Kellanova is.
It's not Kellogg.
Because it's like snack foods. It's like, I mean, they could have named it Pringles. That would have been like very, very well, right? I mean, Pringles. Everyone knows Pringles, but Kellanova.
There is a WK Kellogg, not to be confused with WK Kellogg, but frankly, if you look at shares of companies that have spun off recently, Veralto, Vestis, Kellogg, they've all had these, WK Kellogg, they've all had these issues. For example, Veralto, this is its second day of trading, shares and closed down 9.5%.
Yeah, this is all about unlocking value. In a couple of years, they'll be back to unlocking value by combining everything, and everyone will be in love with conglomerates once again.
I don't know about you guys, but there's a lot going on, and we ain't even over yet.
I got to get some Kellanova special K or something.
Kellanova for everybody. That would be a good cocktail name. I'd like a Kellanova.
A Kellanova.
Yeah.
I think of it less than cereal, but you know.
Yeah, it doesn't lend itself to snacks.
It sounds like a satellite that someone misplaced in space.
Floating around.
All right. We got to run.
I got a lot more jokes, girl.
I
Do we
can
have time?
tell, like, 2 shows daily or nightly or whatever you say. All right, guys, that's a
You know
wrap.
Carolyn works a 3.5-day week.
Stop that. You know I'm here a lot. All right, that'll do it for our cross-platform coverage.
She didn't say 5 days a week.
Radio, TV. Hey. Radio, TV, YouTube, and, of course, Bloomberg Originals. We'll see you again, guys, tomorrow. Including that vote now that is underway on the House floor in the U.S. Capitol to remove Kevin McCarthy as U.S. House Speaker. So let's get to it. We've been trying to keep it real and keep you up to date on it all. So right now with us is Bloomberg News political reporter Ryan Teague Beckwith joining us from D.C. So Ryan, where are we in this process?
So right now there is a half an hour for each side to make their case for either removing or keeping Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. So we're in the middle of those. Everybody's getting up and making their little speeches, and then we will have the vote.
Okay, so what happens if they do vacate the Speaker, if essentially they do oust Kevin McCarthy? What comes next?
Well, you may remember from earlier in this year where there was this sort of long, drawn-out process where they kept trying to confirm him as Speaker and failing, and they went through multiple rounds of voting. One option is to go straight into that and just somebody else steps forward and says, I submit my name, and they see if they can get a majority of the Republican caucus. Another possibility is that they just pick pro tem speakers, where they sort of rotate it among a group of people for a couple days until they, while they find someone else. This is unusual in that sometimes when there's a challenge to a speaker and people decide they don't like where the speaker is going, they usually have like someone in mind instead. And in this case, it's been entirely, do you like him or not?
Couple of things. Is this the first time, if indeed he is removed as a House Speaker, first time that this has ever happened?
Honestly, there was like a thing like 100 years ago, and I'm not conversant enough with 19th century congressional history to tell you exactly what went down with that. I can't tell you that this would make it the third shortest speakership in history.
And can he come back possibly?
Oh, sure. Speakers come back all the time. I mean, the only thing that would keep you from being a speaker is, honestly, I don't even think there is anything that could stop that. The Constitution is the speakership is in the Constitution, and it literally just says the House shall choose its speaker. It does not even have to be a member of the House for you to become speaker. It can be anyone they want.
That said, it doesn't feel like there are any visible alternatives that the Republican Party could agree on, right?
I mean, there's certainly lots of people who look at themselves in the mirror and call themselves Madam Speaker to see how it sounds or whatnot. There's no shortage of people with ambition on the Hill. The question is there anyone who could unite the caucus, especially with such a narrow margin and this unruly group that Representative Matt Gaetz is ringleading here? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know how anyone squares that circle. It's not been an easy task for McCarthy, and you see where it's gotten him.
We're obviously focusing on the role the Republicans have in all of this, and I get why. What about the Democrats? Where in terms of what could possibly come next as a next Speaker of the House, what role could they play or might they play?
I mean, I think where you're at this point is among Democrats, the sentiment is if your opponents are on a sinking ship, don't rush over to rescue them. The more the House Republican caucus looks dysfunctional, the better that probably is for Democrats and Democratic candidates for House in 2024. So from their perspective, hey, guys, have at it. I don't know that they're going to have good relations with any speaker, but they weren't on particularly good terms with McCarthy towards the end there. I feel a lot of Democrats have felt just sort of burned by him in the past. and we're not in the mood to come and rescue him. I think that is a difference. I think that Nancy Pelosi may have rescued John Boehner, for example, if he had faced a similar revolt, and Democrats were just not in any mood to do something like that.
Could you have an interim speaker for an extended period of time?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, they could do it however they want. I mean, as I said, the rules are the House shall choose its speakers, and then there's rules within the House. But if you recall, the Senate recently just voted to change its rules, like basically overnight, on the dress code because people were upset with how John Fetterman was dressing. So if the House decided that they wanted to pass a rule that everyone gets to be speaker for a day and do whatever they want, I mean, they can do that. There is a possibility that someone could put themselves forward as I'll be a caretaker here while we sort out what we want to do. But that's sort of like announcing that you're going to be a one-term president. Nobody really wants to do it because it makes you a lame duck right off the bat. So I would imagine that whoever wants to do this job is going to say, I want to do this job for real.
Let's remind everybody the U.S. House of Representatives is, as we are talking with our Ryan Teague Beckwith, half an hour for each to make their case, and that this has to do, debating really this resolution to remove U.S. House of Speaker Kevin McCarthy. So very interesting to see where this ultimately will end up. Having said that, Ryan, what's the mood in and around the Capitol?
I mean, there's some days where it's an air of sort of resignation coupled with it's kind of like watching reality TV. Like these people are sort of fighting with each other and acting poorly, and you get some sort of secondary amusement from it, you know. But you also think, boy, I wouldn't want to live in that house. Democrats are obviously find this whole thing just hilarious and are watching it with amusement, but they're also a little nervous about what happens 44 days from now when we start facing that budget crunch again. If these guys can't even agree on a speaker, they're thinking, how are we going to avoid a shutdown? So that's not good for the whole governance thing, but I think we had kind of passed the point where there's going to be much productive governance anyway.
Is that November date the one to worry about, or was there any policies or potential bills that could have come up between now and then that this is going to derail, that we really expected to be moved forward?
No, I mean, anything else that they would be working on right now would be stuff that they want to get done. And if they want to get it done, they can get it done. You know, bipartisan stuff. Renaming post offices can always move forward whenever they want to. The big question had been, you know, if they were going to try to do the regular order on appropriations bills, you know, where you have 12 different bills and you vote on each one individually, that just takes time. And 45 days would be enough time. But if they spend, you know, the first 6 of those days arguing over, you know, who gets to sit in the chair, that's a lot of time that they're not using wisely. And that means that we're that much closer to another flare-up in a month and a half over what do we do if we didn't pass all these bills. And that means another continuing resolution, and that's what prompted this in the first place, was that Speaker McCarthy had agreed to a short-term kick the can down the road to buy us some time, and that apparently was a bridge too far for a certain group of House Republicans.
Hey, Ryan, really quickly, 30 seconds here. You talked about these pro tem speakers that they could rotate for a while. Is there, though, anybody that is an obvious successor to Kevin McCarthy? Just very quickly.
I would probably keep my eye on Representative Elise Stefanik. She seems pretty smart and savvy and definitely ambitious, and she's in leadership now, so she would be a natural one to put her name forward.
All right, so appreciate it. I know it's a busy day, and you guys have a lot going on. Bloomberg News political reporter Ryan Teague Beckwith. Check out all of his reporting on the Bloomberg as he continues to track what is happening right now at the U.S. Capitol. The U.S. House of Representatives voting on a motion to oust the current Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. We will continue to track that vote. As Ryan mentioned to us right now, there is a lot of debate going on, each side making their case, but then ultimately it will lead to a vote. We're going to have more coming up on this as we continue to track it right here on Bloomberg.
Yeah, the roll call happening right now, and we do expect some resolution to the vote any minute now.
Yeah. Exactly. You are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. The House vote to remove Speaker Kevin McCarthy underway right now. We've got you covered. Details coming up. Number of headlines on the Bloomberg Professional Service. Palantir said to be closing in on a controversial UK health data contract. Intel shares higher by roughly 2% post-market after the company reports plans to separate its Programmable Solutions Group, PSG, operations into a standalone business. Again, those headlines right now on the Bloomberg Professional Service. A busy day on Wall Street, down day as well. Stocks sank, Treasury yields hit new multi-year highs after jobs data bolstered the case for the Fed to keep rates elevated. 10-year yield 4.78%. The 2-year 5.14%. S&P down 59, ending the day at 42.29, drop there of 1.3%. Dow Jones Industrial Average right at 33,002, down 431 points today, down 1.3%. Nasdaq down 1.9%, down 248 points. Again, the 10-year worth repeating 4.78%. That 2-year 5.14%. Spot gold down $3.50 the ounce to $18.24, while West Texas Intermediate crude $89.52 a barrel, up by 0.8%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week on this Tuesday. Carol Massar along with Simone Foxman, who is in for Tim Stanovic. You are live on Bloomberg Radio, on YouTube, and of course, Bloomberg Originals. We are certainly focused on a vote underway in Washington. The U.S. House of Representatives continuing to vote on a motion to oust the current Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. We're talking about Kevin McCarthy, and about 435 members, as you know, of the U.S. House of Representatives, and we are seeing roughly, I'm looking at some of the vote counts, and it looks like that we are more than 200, maybe 230, 40.
240, yeah, it looks like pretty much equally split yay and nay.
At this point, yeah, exactly. And it's going to be interesting. It's been a difficult day for the Speaker of the House. Kevin McCarthy lost a pivotal vote earlier today. He was looking to basically stay this move and maybe prevent it from happening, but the hardline conservatives of the Republican Party having the power to really end what would be a very tumultuous 10 months as Speaker of the House. It was a hard-win vote and measure and process to get to be Speaker of the House, and nonetheless, here we are, and his future is in question. So let's get to it with Rick Davis. He is a partner at Stone Capital. He's a former Republican strategist. He was Senator John McCain's campaign manager for the 2008 presidential run. Hey, Rick, great to have you here with Simone and myself. Interesting times in U.S. politics again. What's top of mind for you here?
Yeah, I think what's top of mind, we're actually seeing history in the making. I mean, this hasn't even been attempted in 100 years, and it's never been successful. And looking at the count that I'm watching in real time, you've got over 7 Republicans that have already voted yes. So unless there is a change in the Democratic count, in other words, if all the Democrats continue to vote for the motion, then you're going to see the removal of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker.
Take us through what happens next, provided he is ousted.
Well, there's a lot of different options. Immediately, the senior ranking member pro tem of the House is made Speaker. So there's like a temporary Speaker, and everybody will remember that famous night where it went 15 ballots to get Kevin McCarthy the speakership. It was the President pro tem of the House presiding over the Senate. So as a caretaker, or the House, as a caretaker of the House. And then you will immediately entertain motions for nomination for the job of Speaker again. I mean, we could literally get right back into it if the House chooses to entertain that motion.
Rick, before we even get there in the thinking process, I'm thinking about where we are right now and how we got to this process and what it says about the division within the Republican Party. You know this party well. You've seen it go through different cycles, but what do you make of kind of where they are, and are they essentially hurting themselves as a party to actually move forward on policy?
Yeah, I really don't see any upside for the Republican Party in the scene that's transpiring right now on the floor of the House of Representatives. I mean, we talked all last week about how it looked like, the Republican Party was sort of tearing itself apart, even just to fund the government in time. And it seemed that there was a certain portion led by the Freedom Caucus that didn't actually want to do anything but shut the government down. In other words, every time the speaker put a deal in front of the House, his own voters, his own members would reject it, to the point where he finally had to put a bipartisan bill in front of him to fund the government, and then it overwhelmingly won. So when you have a group of no more than 30, and in many cases, probably today, less than 10 members, able to control the outcome of a caucus, even the most historic thing, which is the removal of a speaker, you have a problem with focusing on issues, because you can't just surrender the majority to this small group of minority. And it shows a problem when you have divided government, where the House is divided almost evenly within 5 ballots of changing hands between Republicans and Democrats.
We're talking with Rick Davis, former Republican strategist, Bloomberg contributor. Also Bloomberg contributor is Jeannie Sheehan Zaino. She is joining us here as well. Jeannie, I want to bring you into the conversation. We've talked about here at Bloomberg that the fabric of U.S. politics is debate and different points of view, but this takes it feels like, to a very extreme level.
It absolutely does, because, what it's really done is it has ground the business of the people to a halt. And, you heard some of this in the statements that were being made on the floor this afternoon, and before this very contentious vote, where you heard members talking about issues at the border, talking about crime, talking about inflation, talking about the mortgages that everybody are facing, and they're almost at 8%. And all of these issues that we face and the things that we depend on the House to take care of for us and to do have all but ground to a halt while we wait to see if the Republican Party can come together to either keep their speaker, oust him, get a new one. And, I would just say that one thing we can't lose sight of is the Speaker of the House is a constitutional position. I was just rereading Article 1, Section 2. This House has to choose a speaker. That's a constitutional requirement. This person is not just a leader of the House or a leader of the Republican Party. They are second in the line to the presidency. And we are very near now a point at which we have nobody in that position. And that is a dangerous position to be in. So it's, historic in the worst way, I would say.
Yeah, it looks like we're about 301 votes through at the moment. Equal sides, yay and nay, but it does seem we're setting up for a likely ouster of Kevin McCarthy. Jeannie, one thing that I wonder is a majority of Americans right now trust Republicans on the economy more than Democrats. And there's the widest gap, 53 to 39%, that the GOP has enjoyed since 1991. Do you think that this undercuts some of that belief if we see this, the party being rent apart in the House?
It's such an important question, because this is one thing that Republicans have had very positively for a number of years in the modern era, that Americans tend to trust them more than Democrats on the economy. But as you look at this chaos unfolding in the House over the issue of the budget, we don't know yet, to your question, but it very likely could damage the Republican brand in that regard. And that is a very dangerous position to be in. And I would just point everybody to what the president has been saying as he gears up in his general election campaign really now, which is that this is a chaotic party. This is the chaotic caucus of the House driven by the Republicans. Do you really want them running your government and, most importantly, your economy. So you can see there the Biden campaign is banking on the fact that Republicans are putting themselves in a losing position in this regard. Right. So we don't know if it's going to happen, but we do know that you have a campaign in the president's campaign that feels like they are dangerously close to blowing up a very positive component of their brand, and something where the president has suffered enormously and still has low numbers, and he's hoping he can pick up a bit in the minds of the people as Republicans go in the opposite direction.
Rick, you're having a meeting with prominent Republicans. What do you say to them? Are they putting their party at risk, certainly come the presidential elections next year?
Yeah, we're stuck on process, and you as a campaign manager, every day you talk about process, you're getting beat by opponents who are talking about policy. Voters don't care about process. The idea that we're taking a time out here today to burn an entire legislative day when we have a budget to fix before the 17th of November, to basically have an inter-party fight. The Democrats are just sitting back watching this happen. And so when you're advising Republican candidates, you're saying, guys, I mean, like, we've spent an enormous amount of time this year talking about who's in charge and how much power we have and who has advantage over the other within our own party. And until at which point you're contrasting with Democrats on these important public policy issues, you're wasting time.
However, is it good for Donald Trump?
Look, I mean, it doesn't help Donald Trump to have a Republican Party in Congress failing, right? I mean, when voters go to the ballot, they're thinking of everything, right? And politics is all national now, right? It starts at the top, President, Senate, House. I mean, and then it gets to the locals. We used to be all politics was local, and you could count on that. Your local sheriff was usually the biggest vote getter on election day. Not anymore. And so people, they consider this stuff. And by the way, if you're Donald Trump, and you see the Republicans acting this way, and you'd actually like to have a Republican House of Representatives if you get elected president, this is not helping their case. I mean, Donald Trump being shackled with a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, if he became president again, really neuters his power. And so, yeah, he'd care about this.
Jeannie, we were asking our Bloomberg Politics reporter Ryan Teague Beckwith about whether there are any possibilities for people who could come out of the woodwork and potentially be voted in as the next Speaker of the House. He mentioned Ellie Stefanik. I know that Steve Scalise has been brought up, but unfortunately, sadly, he's going through cancer treatment at the moment. Is there anyone you see as a possibility outside those two, or do you think either of those two are truly possible?
Yeah, another name that was floated by the Washington Post over the weekend was Tom Emmer. But as far as I know at this point, all of these people are behind, at least, and rightly so, part of the leadership team and still behind Kevin McCarthy. Now, depending on what happens, if Kevin McCarthy loses the speakership and, if he doesn't decide to put his name in again, which I would think he would, could one of those people serve? I mean, I think they would be natural people to look to. They are in leadership right now, but I really think we are not at that point yet. One of the big things here is, number one, who would really want this job? One thing you have to say for Kevin McCarthy, whether you like him or not, is he is willing to go through all of this pain, and he's been doing it for 9 months now, 10 months now.
Right.
He has been willing to sit down and to take it from these Republicans. So I'm not sure how many people have that constitution. And he's also somebody who seems to really enjoy and like the job, as painful as it is, at least up till this morning, right? So I'm not sure who else would be in the offing, but those are some of the names that we have heard. So, it is a very powerful position. If he loses and doesn't run again, I think somebody will step up. But I'm not sure that they would have any more ability to control this caucus, given the way it's running now, than Kevin McCarthy has, because this is not about a mistake by Kevin McCarthy. This is about the fact they have rules that have given power to a small minority. You cannot run a House of Representatives this way, no matter who you are, whether you are God himself or not. It is not going to work. And we've seen that. Paul Ryan, John Boehner, now Kevin McCarthy. So whoever steps in, it's not going to make much of a difference. We've got to fix these rules and get the House working again.
It's a good reminder of how it's been tricky for leaders in Congress. I do want to remind everybody that right now underway, the U.S. House of Representatives is voting at the nation's capital on a motion to oust the current U.S. Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. A simple majority, 218 votes, is needed to do that. We are getting very, very close to that. According to counts, I'm looking at almost 200, 191 or so in favor of ousting the current U.S. House Speaker. We are talking with Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano. Having said that, Rick, you know, it is interesting what Jeannie said. It's not about Kevin McCarthy. Who can unite the caucus going forward at a time where you have a former president who seems to call so many shots still for the Republican Party, when you still have a Republican Party, many members, many would argue, that really aren't behind the past president. So who unites this party?
Yeah, you make a really good point about the nature of President Trump's relationship with this House Republican crowd. Remember, it was Kevin McCarthy that kind of opened the door to Donald Trump's rehabilitation after January 6th. Most of the leaders of the Republican Party had vilified Trump for participating in, if not encouraging, the attack on the Capitol. Trump had gone to Mar-a-Lago in his post-presidency. And it was Kevin McCarthy, whose ambition to be Speaker of the House seemed way ahead of everything, went down to Mar-a-Lago and found some common cause with Donald Trump. And as one of the senior Republicans in the country, created an opening for Donald Trump to be rehabilitated. Now look what we do. We have a situation 2 years later, or a year and a half later, where Kevin McCarthy may potentially lose the one thing he wanted most that took him to Mar-a-Lago that day to ask for Donald Trump's help in winning the House of Representatives for Republicans. And Donald Trump, who seems on the verge of being able to snatch a Republican nomination away from a pretty impressive field of candidates who don't seem to be able to make traction against the former president. So at the end of the day, I think that we're seeing incredible irony that the one person who really rehabilitated Trump could be taken down by Trump's own strongest supporters in the House of Representatives.
And now 209 votes to oust Speaker Kevin McCarthy. We need 218 if that motion will succeed. Jeannie, is there anything that the Democrats would want that would bring them to the table to support McCarthy?
Yeah, and I would just remark how remarkable it is that Democrats sticking together here. As I'm looking, 204 Democrats all together on yes to oust him, and 0 Democrats saying no. You know, theoretically, I suppose there are things he could offer. Maybe he would have had some leverage had he made a deal on Ukraine funding, for instance, or a power sharing agreement, you know. So theoretically, I can think of things some Democrats would have maybe wanted to work with him on. Certainly moderate Democrats don't relish the chaos in the House. But I think one remarkable aspect of what, you know, we have seen over the last few days is Hakeem Jeffries, this new minority leader, this new leader of the Democratic Party, has done quite a remarkable job keeping his caucus together. And almost every single Democrat you hear from or talk to says the same thing. I'm going to follow our leader, Hakeem Jeffries. And so when Jeffries came out, followed by the Speaker Emeritus, Nancy Pelosi, with very strong language, it looks like there was no going back. So I think at this point it's a done deal for Democrats.
Hey guys, hang on for a second. We want to take you back to the nation's capital where that House vote is going on to remove U.S. Speaker of the House because they're getting very close to the needed simple majority of 218 votes. Looks like we're at about 215, 216 in favor of ousting Kevin McCarthy as the House Speaker. Let's listen in for a little bit. You can hear a little bit of the counting going on in the background. As we said, it looks like they're just 2 or 3 votes away from this actually happening. Unprecedented, or at least hasn't happened in about 100 years, as we talked with our Ryan Teague Beckworth earlier today. So we're going to continue to monitor and take you back to the House floor. Having said that, interesting times. If you're President Biden, Jeannie, if you're advising the president, what should he be doing at this moment?
You know, I think he should continue running his Rose Garden strategy, really looking presidential, doing the business of the people. This is what they have determined is the path forward for the president, which is letting the Republicans sort of stew in their chaotic realm in the House, and he continues to do the business of the people. So today, things like assuring our allies that we are, supremely supportive of Ukraine, the funding would come through, and really focused on those issues and stay out of it. You know, the old adage in politics, when your opponent is shooting him or herself in the foot, you don't need to step in there. And I think they should stay above it, keep quiet, and see what the House decides to do, the Republicans in the House, that is, and to support Hakeem Jeffries. He is a young and very dynamic leader of the House Democrats, and he has been tested in the last few days and proven himself.
We just want to remind everybody back to the House floor, reading off the names of the members of the House of Representatives who have not voted yet. Vote very close. Looks like just about 2 more votes, 3 more votes needed. Actually, 2 more votes needed to oust Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker.
Yeah,
let's listen in for a moment.
435 votes in, it looks like. 425 votes in.
Of Texas.
So again, the roll call continuing as they are asking for those members of the House of Representatives to continue the voting process here. Very, very close. 218 needed, a simple majority in the House of Representatives to oust Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker. It's been a busy day, a stressful day, certainly, for the Speaker of the House, who lost that pivotal test vote earlier today that would have blocked this from happening. But again, the roll call continuing on the House floor.
And those who were in the House could see he was sitting there quietly, a little laugh at moments when some commented about the Republicans running around with scissors in their hands, the hardline Republicans. But now, obviously, this is the result, 216 to 209 at the moment, yay to nay of what might happen to Kevin McCarthy.
Right, and as we've been talking with Jeannie Shanzano and, of course, Rick Davis, Jeannie pointing out, the ability of the Democrats to stick together on this, to oust the Speaker of the House. And so they have certainly made a decision as the party. Hey, one thing I want to ask you guys, Jeannie, Nancy Pelosi not being there, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite remarkable. Of course, she is, handling, of course, the passing of her dear friend, Dianne Feinstein. But it is a changing of the guard, and she has expressed full support for Hakeem Jeffries, even though she did not want the Democrats to go along with, saving McCarthy, quote unquote. She said she will do what the minority leader rather decides. And so she's got to be very happy with how this has turned out today and very proud of her successor.
Hey, Rick, come on back in as we continue to watch this process. Politics, American politics, just go to Hamilton, watch that show, and you'll understand it can get messy and dirty at times. But again, does this feel a little bit different in terms of our history?
Yeah, I mean, this is an extraordinary measure. This isn't, a TV show. This is history in the making. A speaker has never been removed by a motion to vacate in the history of our Congress. And so what we're seeing today is really something quite amazing. And it looks like, just from watching where they are now, is they had a number of members who have not voted who are present. So I think they're going back through the call. But it's interesting. I mean, if I'm reading this right, who wants to be the member that removes the first speaker on a motion to vacate as the final vote? So I mean, you can tell this is probably weighing heavy in the chamber. Look at the people seated around the room. Everyone is quiet. They've got their heads down. They're just listening to the Secretary of the Senate read the roll call. it's a solemn moment in the House of Representatives today, and one I suspect none of them thought they would ever see in their tenure as members of the House.
That's a really great point, because we've been kind of fixated on the numbers that just kind of settled at this 216 in favor of ousting Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. And you're right, like, we need to stop for a moment. It's not a video game. It's not a streaming service. This is reality. This is U.S. politics. Let's take you back to the House floor for a moment. And the Secretary of the State.
The nays are 210. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
All right. So
The
there we
gavel
have it.
marking a momentous development in U.S. politics, I think. The first time since 1910 that this has even come up.
So Republican Kevin McCarthy, losing that vote there and being removed as Speaker of the House. Again, you just heard it live from the House fall. A historic rebuke to his speakership, a short term, if you will, about 10 months in or so. But as we heard from our Ryan Teague Beckwith, I think the third shortest tenure as a House Speaker in U.S. history. Rick Davis is still with us, partner at Stone Court Capital, a Bloomberg contributor, also a Bloomberg Politics contributor, Jeannie Shanzano. It is a moment in time, as you said, Rick, a moment in our history. So it's done. 216, the vote to oust the Speaker. So now what? What are you thinking at this point?
Well, it's reminiscent of the times we're in. I mean, we are breaking so many historic norms. It used to be it was very rare for a president of the United States to be impeached, yet the House of Representatives had 3 impeachments in the last 15, 20 years. It's a very rare thing, maybe the rarest thing, to remove a speaker. We just saw that happen right before our eyes. And it's really quite amazing, because I think when Matt Gaetz, who's really a performance politician, he's not known for his legislation, he's not known for his political power, he's pretty much a loner. He's not a major figure in any of these caucuses that make up the Republican caucus in the House, was able to take down the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And I think a lot of members I was talking to throughout the week really saw it as more of a nuisance, a waste of time. Why are we going to have to do this? We have other jobs to do. We've got a lot of work to do passing these appropriations bills to fund the government. And I don't know, even on Monday, if anybody really took it seriously, the threats that Matt Gaetz was putting. And now we see it actually come to fruition. And I'm sure Matt Gaetz is going to get what he wanted, which is a big scrum of reporters covering him when he makes his statement after this, declaring victory. And it may be a victory for Matt Gaetz, but it's not one for the country.
Rick, hang on a second. I do want to mention Republican Congressman Patrick McHenry has been named interim Speaker of the House. This is something we probably widely expected in terms of people maybe taking an interim position now that Kevin McCarthy has been voted out. The House is in recess subject to call of the chair. So just to give you an update on what's going on in Washington. BN Bloomberg News congressional reporter Eric Wasson with us. Eric, we are living, as we say, over and over again in historic times, certainly when it comes to U.S. politics. Tell us about what you've seen and, there in terms of the nation's capital.
I mean, it's just quite a historic moment. It's just absolutely shocking. We're waiting here now for Kevin McCarthy to come out and see what the next moves are. But, the Speaker could try to run again for his old job. We could see the House paralyzed for weeks as they try to, deal with this. But as for right now, there's no clear path forward for the House of Representatives.
And we should we, we're going to continue to watch for developments to see who else we might hear from Washington.
Yeah, and it looked like the House floor was breaking up. There's some sort of recess. What's your sense, Eric, of how soon the Congress could reconvene to make some sort of decision to go forward? Will we hear from people in the meantime?
It's really not right clear. We're expecting McCarthy to come out at any moment from this door. We just saw a lot of the dissidents go off into their own area. This is going to be a really moment of uncertainty. That's going to tie up the nation's business. There's a shutdown deadline looming November 17th. If appropriation bills aren't passed, the House is now going to be largely distracted by the speaker's race, unable to really complete business in most people's view. And the Senate's on basically a 2-week vacation. So I think there's a lot of risks for the economy just from this level of dysfunction.
Hey, Eric, was it safe to say that when Kevin McCarthy lost that earlier vote this morning or earlier today to block this ultimate vote that ousted him, could you feel a mood change, that it was just a matter of time before the Speaker of the House was out?
I felt like the mood changed when he, this morning announced he wouldn't negotiate with Democrats, and then Democrats, ebullient, clapping, cheering, all decided that they were not going to try to save him. If they weren't going to get anything for this, they were going to come running to the rescue. I think he perhaps miscalculated and thought that they would do that. He said, "Bring it on." He seemed very confident. But he may not quit. He may continue to try to run for this job and by attrition, 15 rounds, 20 rounds, and see if the other side gives up. So it could be in a period of extended turmoil here for days, if not weeks.
Eric, I know you're waiting on McCarthy to come speak, but stick with us if you can. Jeannie, I just want to go back to you. I mean, did this miscalculation, it appears, on McCarthy's part surprise you at all?
It surprised me a little bit that after Saturday, he didn't reach out to Democrats to try to strike some kind of deal to keep his job, but only a little bit, because had he done that, we probably would have been in the same position. He loses 8 Republicans today in a vote. Had he reached out and struck a deal with Democrats on another vote, he could have lost many more Republicans. So it pretty much was a no-win situation for him. So from that perspective, it doesn't surprise me. And, I will go talk to students tonight, and we've heard this from Eric, Rick, everybody you've been talking to. Historic, unprecedented, those are the words that come to mind. And I can't tell you how bizarre it is to talk to young people. And pretty much everything you say about politics today starts with the words unprecedented, historic, strange. And that's sort of the position that we are in. And it just doesn't look like we are near the end of it at this point. A house in chaos, a continuing resolution gets us through the 17th of November. What happens with Moody's? Do they downgrade? Right. Do they follow Fitch? Fitch downgrades because we can't do regular business. And this is another reminder of that. So as much as this is a Washington story, the ramifications are enormous. And this is self-sabotage by the Republicans on themselves to a degree that we cannot stress enough.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Moody's, only remaining major credit grader to give the U.S. a top rating, warned late September its confidence in the U.S. is wavering because of concerns about governance. Hey, I want to go back to you, Eric. I know it's been a crazy day as you continue to watch what's going on in and around the halls of Congress on this historic Tuesday, safe to say. Matt Gaetz, the hardliners versus the rest of the Republican Party. Was the rest of the Republican Party, could you tell, there some frustration that this is what was happening today, or were increasingly the broader Republicans on board? We certainly could see it from the vote, on board with what those few 10, 20 of hardline conservatives, wanted to do here. Do we have Eric, guys? Do we have Eric Wasson? Okay, so Eric Wasson obviously busy and getting ready for U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy probably to make some comments. We will take you live to D.C. as soon as that begins. In the meantime, still with us, lucky for us, Rick Davis and Jeannie Sheehan Zaino, both Bloomberg Politics contributor, both who have seen interesting cycles over the last 5-10 years or longer, to say the least. But I do wonder kind of what happens next in terms of pressures on the Republican Party, Rick, once again, to start looking like they have things under control, because many would argue they don't right now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the immediate problem that Republicans face right now is they've got to replace a speaker. And as Jeannie said earlier, it's a constitutional requirement, right? You can't sit around without a succession plan for the government, and the Speaker is the number 2 behind the President, Vice President in succession. So the House has a very big constitutional responsibility, and it's not totally clear how that's going to play out. I mean, obviously, the guy who starts from a big lead is Kevin McCarthy. He just got 210 votes, and there's nobody else today that I could tell you would get that many votes for Speaker. Now, we've talked about a lot of different options, or whether or not Kevin McCarthy is going to say, fine, put me in the nomination. And so it's really quite amazing. The House has to be laser focused now on putting a member in the chair. And all the while, again, we've talked about process versus policy. All those appropriations bills are still sitting there waiting for action in the House. They got 47 days to get these things off and out before the federal budget goes empty again, and we have another financial crisis. And as you say, rating agencies like Moody's are watching this, saying, "Can you actually execute on a plan and get these things done?" So, enormous pressure on the floor of the House of Representatives right now, because something that I think most, if not the vast majority, everybody but 8 people probably thought this wasn't going to happen today. But those 8 that Republicans who voted against Kevin McCarthy had a plan for replacement. Now we're going to see, well, what's their plan to put somebody new in that chair?
Rick, does this have ramifications on the broader Republican Party? Because we've seen really a split between where they come at, and that split is playing out on the House floor.
Yeah, I worry about that a lot. Probably almost everyone I've talked to who has retired from the House of Representatives or the Senate is because of the dysfunction in those chambers. Not because they're too old. We know that there's a lot of old people in Congress. That doesn't seem to bother them, but frustration. And it's interesting. I mean, you used to get thrown out of Congress when you got beat. Now most of the people who leave Congress leave because they're just frustrated. And there are a lot of really good members in the House of Representatives who are, I promise you right now, thinking, why would I run for re-election in the middle of a tough election year, especially if Trump's at the top of the ticket? I've got all this, division within my own caucus in the House of Representatives. We don't get anything done. I came here to serve the people, and all I'm doing is serving special interests within the caucus. And I suspect that affects, how many of these open seats we're going to have. So, yeah, I mean, it is a very, very difficult situation to play politics in Washington. And a lot of good people are choosing to go on and do other things with their life, which is very much at the detriment of the American people and government writ large.
Well, the process that started last night by the Representative Matt Gaetz, of course, Republican from the state of Florida, that was the resolution that ultimately is brought to the House floor to oust Kevin McCarthy. He is speaking to reporters, and one headline crossing the Bloomberg as he speaks to reporters that he says he has no desire to actually be Speaker of the House. So that is just crossing as we speak, and we'll continue to monitor some of these press conferences. Hey, Jeannie Zaino, saving 30 seconds for you. Your final thoughts on this?
I hope everybody gets to ask Matt Gaetz what he achieved with all of this. He wants regular order. This is not regular order. The entire House has ground to a standstill. This was partisan self-sabotage by the Republicans that he led, and not only unprecedented, it really is something that somebody described as witless, and I would agree with that description. We don't need to be here, and yet we're all held hostage by this. It's sorry to be so negative, but it is a very, very bad moment for the House.
No.
Can you hop on our
totally agree.
I'm hopping off this other one and hopping on.
All right, we're going to let Rick go. They are busy too because we are weighing and leaning on them in a big way. Rick Davis, thank you so much. Jeannie Zaino, both Bloomberg politics contributor, weighing in on this historic day as Republican Kevin McCarthy ousted as Speaker of the House. Don't go anywhere. That'll do it for Simone and me. But coming up, a special edition of Balance of the Power on this Tuesday.
From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance balance of power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Anne-Marie Hordern, I'm Joe Matthew.
A historic day in Congress. Representative Kevin McCarthy is no longer Speaker of the House.
The yeas are 216. The nays are 210. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
That vote just occurred moments ago as we witness history in Washington. Now Patrick McHenry will serve as interim Speaker. The House is in recess, but when they come back, they will be in search of a new Speaker. Anne-Marie, this is a remarkable moment. We just witnessed that together just a few moments ago. After an attempt to table that motion, we knew early on today things were not looking good for Kevin McCarthy.
Potentially that table could have given them more time, more leeway. But then Speaker McCarthy said, let's do it. He controls the floor, and he put that motion to vacate on the floor.
That's right.
Roll call, everyone stood up and had to say yes or no, whether or not they want him to be Speaker. And it's just historic.
Well, it absolutely is. Right now. We've seen motions to vacate filed, but never actually a Speaker ousted in this fashion. And we're going to speak in a few moments with Congressman Mike Lawler of New York, who was a no vote today. We went right down to the wire, Anne-Marie, with a number of members, including those in the Freedom Caucus, not announcing their plans in advance. This was a surprise for a lot of folks.
It was absolutely a surprise for a lot of folks, and everyone's asking themselves, yes, the House is in recess. The chair of the Financial Services, Patrick McHenry, he will be the interim Speaker. But at some point, they're going to also vote for a new Speaker. And remember how many rounds it took Speaker McCarthy in January?
15. We'll see if we can set history again.
So what they're not going to be focusing on are those 12 appropriation bills that Congressman Matt Gaetz continuously talks about and what he actually wants the focus to be upon. Let's quickly get some context about what is going on with Bloomberg contributor Rick Davis. He's, of course, with Stone Court Capital. Rick, thank you so much for jumping on the line. Please give us your reaction to everything that just unfolded this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm in a bit of a state of shock. You don't normally have a historic norm. No speaker in history has been removed by a motion to vacate. And so we just watched that happen in real time just moments ago. I feel a little bit like what I saw on the floor of the House, which were a lot of members just looking shocked. 210 people voted for Speaker McCarthy to stay in the chair, and they no longer have a speaker now, and the moment is now beginning where they're starting to think through what happens next. And I promise you, not one of those people were sitting around today thinking that McCarthy might lose this vote. They were hopeful, and they were working it hard for McCarthy to retain the speakership. A lot was at stake. And the fact that that didn't happen is going to leave a lot of the leadership in shock. You saw Congressman Patrick McHenry be placed in as the temporary speaker. And when he gavelled the House into recess for a moment, he hit that thing so hard I thought the entire chamber would shake. There's a lot of emotion on the floor of the House of Representatives right now.
Well, there sure is. Rick, we were on Bloomberg Radio together when we learned that Hakeem Jeffries had decided to tell Democrats to not move in the defense of Kevin McCarthy. Was that the moment this whole thing turned?
Yeah, I think that it might have been known to Kevin McCarthy that was going to happen after his conversation earlier this week with Hakeem Jeffries. I think it was one of these things where Jeffries said publicly, I'm not going to do anything for this guy unless he asks me. And Kevin McCarthy's attitude was, I'm not going to ask Democrats to vote for me, but they can vote their conscience. Well, that's not how the House of Representatives works, Mr. Speaker. I mean, you know better than that. You needed to have a deal coming out of there to have Congressman Jeffries, get something for the support. I think this could have been easily avoidable. I don't know if it was hubris or stubbornness, but Kevin McCarthy chose not to cut a deal with Democrats and have a coalition of like-minded people trying to govern. and instead fell prey to Matt Gaetz and a bunch of fringe players on the Republican Party.
If he cut a deal with Democrats, though, wouldn't those voices on the right just grow louder and larger? We should note to our viewers, let's just play what House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries had to say earlier. This was before the vote about the situation.
In the chaos, in the dysfunction, in the extremism, we are ready, willing, and able to work together with our Republican colleagues, but it is on them to join us to move the Congress and the country forward.
So clearly, Rick, Hakeem Jeffries wanted something substantial, almost as you're talking about, changes of rules, potentially more Democrats on committees. Wouldn't that give too much away where Republicans would go very uneasy with Kevin McCarthy?
Well, first of all, I think Kevin McCarthy has a very strong group of House Republicans who are for him pretty much however he would like to govern, right? We are talking about a fringe group, the Freedom Caucus, of no more than 30, probably 20, who have called